I'm going to go over your week 1 assignments. For each week you have a discussion in a paper. For the first week you need to post your autobiography, which I'm sure you're used to by now. Just post that first, on the first day. And you have a discussion. Now, what I would do first is look at the doing discussions right document, because it really gives you some more details to the expectations. So it really does give you some insight on what you need to do as far as kind of what content length, and it doesn't give you, it gives you a target for initial posts. So that's helpful, and it also responses. So just follow, take a moment to read this and follow those suggestions for every discussion that you do in this class. And so for this week, the topic content requirement would be, you get to choose one. Well, sorry, I keep on messing that up there. Okay. You get to choose one of the following bullets. So you don't have to do them all, and you can kind of decide which one you feel like you have the most to write about, and you can choose that one and write about it. So any one of these. So one of them deals with the theories of management and historical context of management and approaches that have evolved over time. The second one is the impact of technology on the role of manager. So that's going to ask you to compare an early theory of management versus a current theory, and then talking about how technology has maybe changed or made that evolve into from previous theories to current theory. So kind of well, I'm sorry, I just messed that up, didn't I? Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know, I keep pushing the wrong button. Way to start the week there. Okay. And then the third one is develop a plan for your approach to management. So you're going to talk about skills and attributes that a leader or manager might possess in their as they approach their duties as a manager. How do they what are the necessary minimum basic skills or characteristics that are needed to be a successful manager? And then how do you implement each function of management in your role as a manager? So how would you approach that? Now the final paragraph, and it even tells you here a guideline of 3 to 4 sentences of the initial post should be to summarize the key points that you are making. So and when you're doing a post, you want to introduce the topic, then you have the body of the text, and then you have a summary paragraph. And this obviously doesn't have to be formatted in APA style as far as indentions, headings, all that stuff in a discussion post, but you do need to cite your sources in APA style, so make sure to do that. Now, this here, it says that you should be the equivalent of 1 to 2 single-spaced pages, but that doesn't mean you do not upload an attachment to the discussion board. It needs to be posted directly in the board. Please do not attach discussions. Discussions are always posted directly on the discussion board, and then projects are actual Word documents that are submitted as a Word file. So just make sure to differentiate between the two, and don't get them confused. For your project, we're going to focus on planning, and you have a big project on week 3, a big one on week 5. So, but the 1, 2, and 4 are smaller papers. So for your first assignment, we're talking about management theory and how it's evolved over time. We're talking about the 4 functions of management, kind of a broad overview. But as we move through the course, we're going to really focus on each one. So, and we've also begun to touch on that first function of planning. So, what you're going to do here for number 1 is you're going to compare the application of each of the 4 functions of management in terms of how it might be different 25 years ago based on the evolution of management theory. So you're going to talk about how the 4 functions might have evolved over time. How were they then? What are they now? You're going to select a manager and assess his or her planning strengths based on assigned reading concepts. So you might use someone that you know, someone that you've worked for. You might research a manager. But either way, it doesn't really matter to me as long as you're able to analyze the strengths that they have. And I mean, number 2 and 3 go together, strengths and weaknesses. It's the same thing. But I do want you to use some type of sources in this. So if you're using your own manager, then obviously you're going to be reading about concepts and theories of management and planning, and you're going to need to draw from that, from some sources. So make sure to use sources in this paper as well and cite them. And when you're using sources, don't use things like eHow, Wikipedia, things that can be updated by anybody online. Don't use those kinds of sources. Don't use about.com. If I were you, I would just stick with the SUO library, or you can use publications like Forbes and Business Week, things like that. Society of Human, well, actually, I don't know if you would use it for this, but you can use any kind of business journal, but don't use sites that can be updated by others that are kind of, sites that you can't really verify that anyone can post on their site and they're not vetted by a panel, or they're not, it needs to be something that has to be accepted. So, when you write for a journal, that has to, go through a bunch of people and it's accepted or it's not. It's basically reviewed by a panel of that person, the writer's peers. Same thing with a article for Forbes magazine or Business Week. I mean, you can't just say, "Hey, I have this article. Will you publish it?" It obviously has to go through a process of approval. So that's what I would ask myself when you're using sources. Ask that question: does this article or go? What has to happen for this article to be published? So you have to think about that. And if it is something that anyone can self-publish, I would avoid that, because it's not being examined and scrutinized by others in the same industry or field. So, okay. So moving on, defend 2 to 3 recommendations for improving the manager's performance. So you need to think this through. You're going to talk about the strengths. You're going to talk about the weaknesses. And then once you look at the weaknesses, you need to consider, well, what are 2 or 3 recommendations I would give for this manager in planning specifically. So you're giving this, in this whole assignment, you're talking about planning, managerial planning, and you're giving a historical context to it, how it's changed. Then you're talking about a specific manager. You're talking about their strengths in planning. Then you're talking about their weaknesses in planning, and then you are making recommendations on how that manager's performance can be better in the area of planning specifically. So that's what you're doing for this paper. Now here it says you have to present your work as a 2 to 3 page report. That does not include, and that goes for every paper in this class, that never includes the title or reference page. It only includes the body of the paper, only. I'm not counting those other 2 pages. So make sure that you are taking that into consideration when you're writing your paper. And I know I talked about support your responses with examples and research. And APA format is required in this class. So what I would do, and I mean, this is not something you have to do. I don't want to, but, sorry. Oh, if I could spell today. Ooh, I can't spell. Okay, sample APA paper. I like this paper. It's a good model. It's on the OWL at Purdue site. You don't have to use it, but it really gives you the structure of what a paper should look like that's properly formatted in APA style. It gives you notes. I mean, it's a model. It's kind of it's like not a template, but a example that you can use. And that really goes for running heads, page numbers, titles, even the way that the paper and the body and the text is indented, the italics, the punctuation, everything. I would use this paper as a model. And here's the link if you need to use that. So that's really all there is for today. For this week anyway. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know and I'll be happy to assist you. My contact number will be in the on the announcement board, and you can text me, call me, or email me anytime you have any questions. I'm looking forward to the term, and I hope you have a great week. Thanks.